This is big. We have learned that the Justice Department's case against former FBI Director Jim Comey and the New York Attorney General have both been dismissed. CNN's Caitlin Polance is covering this. Caitlin, okay, what happened here? I don't know which case you want to take first.
Well, they both are being dismissed, and for essentially the same reason that Lindsey Halligan, the Eastern District of Virginia interim U.S. attorney sent there by Donald Trump, not Senate confirmed, that she doesn't have the power. What the judge here has found, this is Judge Cameron McGowan from South Carolina. She came into the district, heard arguments from both of the lawyers on these cases against Lindsey Halligan's role. They argued that she didn't have the power because she wasn't Senate confirmed, and thus these indictments are invalid. The judge is agreeing with that. Judge Currie is saying that the Attorney General's attempt to install Ms. Halligan as interim U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia was invalid, and because Ms. Halligan had no lawful authority to present the indictment, James Comey's motion is granted, the indictment is dismissed. Now, the judge does mention that this is without prejudice. So in legal speak, that means that it could be brought back by another prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia if they took it through the grand jury again. But everything Lindsey Halligan did at the end of September, beginning of October, and since then, this judge is saying she couldn't have done that. She didn't have the authority. She was not confirmed by Congress, by the U.S. Senate as the Eastern District of Virginia's U.S. attorney, and thus the president went out of his bounds, and the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, also overstepped her bounds in sending Lindsey Halligan into this district to get these indictments against both Comey and James.
And can I raise a question with Comey? I know that she had made, at least the judge pointed out, a serious error when it came to the grand jury. So what we're saying now is even that mistake that everyone had been talking about, it's moot, because essentially what I'm hearing you say is they're saying she shouldn't have been in the job in the first place.
It may be moot, yes. We still are waiting to see if Judge Nachmanoff, the presiding judge over this case, what he does. He hasn't actually entered into the record yet that the cases are dismissed. We just have this other order from the judge saying that the indictment against James should be dismissed, the indictment against Comey should be dismissed. We'll see what this other judge does now with that. But this isn't about, Audie, what you are bringing up, what Lindsey Halligan may have done with the grand jury in getting the indictment of James Comey through to the magistrate judge after they had voted down one of the charges against Comey and only secured 2 charges against him. There was that big hiccup, but it isn't what's being addressed here. This is solely about, did the Department of Justice formally take the pains it needed to get someone into the position of U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. And this judge, Judge Currie, she says they did not. And so everything that interim U.S. Attorney Lindsey Halligan has done, it's invalid at this time.
Does this mean this is done? Can these charges come back?
Hadi, there are always appeals. This is at the district court level, and so it is very likely that whatever happens next will be kicking around in appeals for months, if not years.
Okay, thanks so much, Caitlin. I want to bring it to the panel now. Obviously, the administration really wanted to have the lawyers they wanted to have in place, usually people from Trump's teams in the past, to go after these figures. And I know Comey had planned in his defense to talk about vindictive prosecution. Now it didn't even get that far. How does this look? I don't know what some of the reaction here is.
I mean, it's kind of predictable in a way. Shortly after the Comey indictment landed, we saw people talk about whether Halligan was actually lawfully prosecuted. And just to be clear, this wasn't some kind of lefty legal commentator who was raising this. This was Ed Whelan of the National Review, who I think initially really raised this as an issue. So there were so many different issues with these prosecutions. It was kind of a question of which one was really going to be the one to get in the way.
Well, then let's see how the White House is taking it. CNN's Kristen Holmes is there. Kristen, what are you hearing?
Well, we're waiting to hear some kind of response here. Nothing from President Trump yet, nothing from the White House, but of course we have reached out. But just a reminder, the White House has been heavily involved in almost all of this. Part of the reason that these charges were brought against Comey, were brought against Letitia James, was because President Trump wanted to have his political foes brought to court. And that's what we saw unfold over the last several months. We know that the U.S. Attorney who is in the Southern District of Virginia, Eric Siebert, was not willing to bring these cases. He's becoming a problem for President Trump. He was becoming kind of a thorn in his side, and eventually he was ousted from that position. He was forced to resign. He's no longer in there. Then we saw President Trump be very involved in the appointment of Lindsey Halligan, to the point where he was posting on Truth Social a direct note to Attorney General Pam Bondi saying that Lindsey Halligan would be a good fit. Halligan herself had been a personal attorney, but she had never appeared before a grand jury ever before this Comey indictment. She was prepared by the FBI attorneys. That's who kind of did murder boards with her and practice rounds with her. And then she did the Comey indictment. And then almost on a whim, from what I'm told by officials, she decided she would also bring this charges against Letitia James in Alexandria just a few weeks ago, which of course then ended up in an indictment there. The White House is going to have a lot to say about this, I am certain, because they have been involved in every single step of this as it has unfolded. And this, bringing these kind of charges against President Trump's political enemies, that is something that he cares deeply about. So that is something that we expect to hear from him on.
Okay, thanks so much, Kristen. I want to come back to Caitlin Polans, who's been following the legal aspects of this. Are you getting more detail?
Yeah, Audie, I was able to read the 26 pages very quickly that Judge Currie wrote in both of these cases, James and Comey. They're essentially the same thing that she's articulating, that Lindsey Halligan, the Eastern District U.S. Attorney, placed there on an interim basis by the executive branch, that she didn't have the power to bring these. And what she is citing, the judge here, the very last thing she says in this opinion is she's invalidating the acts performed by Ms. Halligan and dismissing the indictments, returning Ms. James to the status she occupied before being indicted, which was not being an employee of the Justice Department. She was in the White House. And she cites the case U.S. v. Trump. So that is the nail in the coffin at this point in time for these two cases. The decision made by Judge Eileen Cannon in Florida last year that the case against Donald Trump related to his alleged mishandling of classified documents, that could not go forward. The judge is saying in this case that James and Comey, they cannot face these charges because the prosecutor was invalid, and she is basing that, according to this order, this 26-page order, largely upon the Trump case, which Donald Trump won and which freed him from being a criminal defendant as he was taking office this year. In that case, that was a case brought by special counsel Jack Smith, and the judge there in Florida, a Trump appointee, Eileen Cannon, she also found that the steps that prosecutor had taken were invalid. He had not been properly appointed. So a really interesting correlation there between these two situations.
And again, just so we're clear, it's not on any of the big merits of the case people had wondered about whether this was vindictive, whether it was revenge, all of these other things. In the end, it's like the people who are supposed to be in these jobs are not in these jobs. Can you remind us what that case that Cannon had ruled on last year comes into play here? What aspects of it?
Yeah, it specifically is the aspect of the prosecutor. In that case was about Trump allegedly mishandling classified documents. But the person who took that indictment through the grand jury, it was Jack Smith, who was brought into the Justice Department to be a special counsel and hold that office. At the time, Judge Cannon dismissed that case last year, saying that Jack Smith, he wasn't approved by Congress to have that job, and Congress hadn't appropriated him the money. That case was dismissed, and then he won the presidency, prompting the Justice Department to put not just that case by Jack Smith, but another one he had brought against Trump in Washington, D.C. On ice, dismiss them. They're not having Trump as a criminal defendant. And so in this case, it's very similar. It is about, did the Justice Department and the executive branch do the things it needed to do? And did Congress approve this prosecutor being in this job? Judge Currie here in the James case, in the James Comey case, the Letitia James case, she's saying, no, Congress did not give the authority to this prosecutor, Lindsey Halligan, in the Eastern District of Virginia, and that is why it is being tossed at this time. She is quite clear here, though, that these indictments need to be dismissed, but she is saying that another prosecutor who appropriately is given the authority by Congress at this point in time could try and revive these cases if they wanted to. That was a very similar thing to what happened in the Trump case as well, where it was dismissed and there was always the possibility that it could come back with another prosecutor, but just not that one, and here, just not this one. Howdy.
Okay, Caitlin, thanks so much. Caitlin bringing to us kind of a political question there at the end, right? I mean, if there's one thing this administration has not been like that interested in doing, it's going to Congress for approval of something. I don't know if this will have implications going forward, but Elena, what do you see and sort of how this is playing out?
I mean, wow, the way Caitlin broke that down. This is very processy.
It is.
But I mean, one, I think the president's going to be furious. I'd remind everyone, remember when he was accidentally posted a personal message, I was told it was supposed to be a text message to Attorney General Pam Bondi saying, Pam, why aren't we prosecuting Comey and Letitia James? Everyone is wondering, we got to get on that. I think you can see how this is going to land with him. I think one of the things Caitlin said earlier, I think Kristen alluded to it as well, I totally agree with this idea that they're going to appeal this, they're going to fight this. This is one court, they have other avenues to try and go around this. I absolutely seeing that probably being the next step and trying to push back on what this judge is saying.